Hi, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the second of our four-part series, Art and Activism in Contemporary Global Landscapes. Please note that this session is being recorded. This series is hosted by the IAMCC, the Islamic Art and Material Cultural Collaborative. The IAMCC is a research network based in Toronto that brings together the capacities and resources of the University of Toronto, the Royal Ontario Museum, and the Aga Khan Museum. Our aim each year is to host a series of online workshops, public lecture, and junior and senior fellow positions. To learn more about our upcoming programming and hiring opportunities, I would encourage you to go to our website, imcc.ca, to see our events and subscribe to our newsletter. I'm your host, Sania Jabeen. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Art History at the University of Toronto and senior fellow at the IAMCC. My co-host today is Dr. Hiba Mustafa, Assistant Professor of Islamic Art and Architecture at the University of Toronto. I would like to thank the IAMCC, especially the behind-the-scenes staff, which includes Nisa Rahman and Zaid Khan. Thank you so much for your continued hard work. Before introducing our speaker for today, I would like to begin with our land acknowledgement. I wish to acknowledge the land on which we are situated today. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and I am grateful for the opportunity to work on this land. A land that continues to provide a home for thousands of immigrants like me, and nourishes and inspires us in ways for which we are forever indebted. I am thrilled to welcome Kaashif Ghanie, or Kaas, a ceramic artist and first-generation mixed Guyanese Canadian Muslim. Kaashif was born in London, Ontario, home of the Anishinaabe, and holds degrees in ceramics and art history. Post-graduation, he completed the Center for Craft Aircraft Residency and the Seeds Business Program in Chipuktuk, or Halifax. Both experiences have helped him launch his contemporary ceramic artistic practice and his functional pottery business, KG Ceramics, and I would encourage everybody to go check out their page once we are done. Ghanie is one of 3 ceramic artists working and operating the ceramic studio in the Wonderneath Art Society. A shout out to the Wonderneath Society, who I hear is hosting a viewing party for this incredibly talented artist. Thank you. In his studio, Kaashif explores and develops his functional pottery and his historical Islamic vessel series of works. The contemporary Islamic vessels are a vehicle to express personal experiences with racism and Islamophobia, as well as many of the global atrocities Muslims face across the world. Kaashif's sculptural and installation pottery is created in the hope of adding and building onto a discourse of deconstructing Islamophobia and furthering a dialogue for the general public. Through the public exhibitions of Kaashif's sculptural Islamic forms, he encourages community members to speak their truths and through the lens of understanding, and hopes that his work help fortify their resilience. This is incredibly important work, and I'm really grateful for Kaashif for joining us and for our audience who is here with us today. The title for our conversation today is All Eyes on Me, The Violence of Discrimination, which is based off Kaashif's work that draws upon, again, personal experience with racism and Islamophobia and turns that trauma into experiential works of art. Please be mindful that during this discussion, we will be talking about mass shootings, personal injury, and racist attacks, which may be triggering for some individuals. Please take care if you are sensitive to such information. This conversation will last for 1 hour, followed by 30 minutes of Q&A. I encourage you to submit your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Welcome, Kaas or Kaashif. I like both of your names. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to try to, I want to begin by trying to understand your experiences as a creator and an artist. And in that sense, I see that your medium of choice in exploring experiences of racism, Islamophobia, and religious identity is ceramics. Considering the long history of ceramics, I would like to begin by understanding your relation and preference for this medium.
Hello, assalamu alaikum to everybody. I'm going to share my screen. I have a little slideshow to share some awesome photos throughout the years, and I think they kind of like tie everything together really nicely. Cool. So I want to thank everybody for coming today. I really appreciate it. And let's begin. Thank you for the introduction, Sadia. So for me, ceramics is something that touches everyone in some way, whether it's the earth you walk on to the dinnerware you're going to be using tonight. For me, pottery has always allowed endless possibilities. My friends will always know I love getting dirty with mud. It hosts so many connections between form, function, history, chemistry. I love the aspect of problem solving and the structuring of work, and whether it's from a small mug to a really large vessel. On your screen here, you can kind of see when I was doing my undergrad, I had the opportunity of working with really large kilns, so I was able to build really large pots, which was a lot of fun back then, working at NASCAD. I think being able to make the smallest, most intimate for everyday object, it's really great, and knowing the impact that it houses on somebody's everyday rituals, versus creating, work that forces the viewer to contemplate and think and ask questions every day. The weird thing is, if you told me 10 years ago that I would own a ceramic company making pottery and also making pottery just in general, I'd kind of give that the idea, because I honestly didn't think this would have been my trajectory. Before my secondary or post-secondary education, while in London, I had the opportunity to do a post-grade 12 program called the BL Art program. And it was really great because it kind of immersed you in all these different fields of, like, from drawing, painting, printmaking, and everything. And I gravitated to like sculpture and figuration, which later led me down to going to NASCAD. And I kind of struggled with trying to end up where I am now, because I couldn't find my niche. And which led me to ceramics. I kind of met up with Professor Neil Forrest, and he allowed me to take some of his courses. And he went to a conference that year, and in the conference, he had a sub, Rachel DeConde, and we got to do pottery or throwing for 2 days. And I had attempted it years ago, but it didn't make any sense to me. And then somehow I went down a rabbit hole, learning how to throw and make these giant forms, and just like enamored by it. I still am enamored by it. And on top of which, like, usually when you're doing your undergrad, it's like 4 years. I did the whole like ceramic portion in like 2 years, which is a little ridiculous. And I was really lucky to, have my wife and, great professors like Joan Bruno, Rory McDonald, Neil, Rachel, and Doug help flourish and help this little seedling flourish. And I'm really grateful. Yeah.
So maybe we can move on to our next question for you, Kaashif. It's clear ceramics have played a monumental role in shedding light on histories of vanished societies and helping us understand the lives of the earliest humans. Is there a difference in how we understand ceramics as historical household items and serveware that continues to bring families and communities together, and how we consider ceramics as media for contemporary artistic practice?
So I want to start off by saying ceramics and clay hold such a vast context and connections. As a ceramic artist, I kind of have to think about that a lot. We always talk about the malleability of clay and how it works, or how clay has memory, in the sense that if you distort a pot on the wheel, and then you try to fix it, the memory of the clay particles will kind of warp back after the firing. So like no matter what, it kind of like goes back to like the mistake originally. So I make and sell functional pottery. It's my bread and butter. my everyday work with my wife, and I create pottery for daily functional use. But originally, we were influenced by nostalgic patterns from family prayer rugs. In my family's homes growing up, everybody had very unique rugs. Prayer was always a very important aspect of the everyday. 5 times a day, we would always take part in using those prayer mats. I would take those elements and designs and reconfigure them onto like surfaces of pottery, which just going to skip. Sorry, skipped ahead there too quickly. Like, oh, sorry. There we go. Reconfigure those aspects of the surfaces on pottery, which is interpreted through sgraffito. Sgraffito is a type of technique where you carve or incise into the clay. So you remove a layer of clay to kind of build up a design. I was very influenced by woodblock prints, because like that also has a lot of like historical references in like printmaking and so on and so forth. But like for me, I just really love the texture and like the ability to kind of get out the surface design. This work of making functional pottery with elements of Islamic designs was meant to create dialogue and discourse that would create kind of like community acceptance. Like if somebody were to like ever buy, a mug or something, they're kind of taking a piece of me with them, and it's going to be part of their rituals at the end of the day. My conceptual practice uses ceramics as a vessel to create dialogue about Islamophobia and racism and other concerns. I've always kind of been interested in using figuration of the human body and I wheel through traditional Islamic forms as a way to present the human body. Pottery and ceramics allows me to access a bridge of figuration in historical cultural objects, because pottery in so many ways is about the body of the maker and the body of the user. And so I'm going to go back one little slide here. There we go. So this piece here, it's called Serving Dinner, Not War. It was made in 2017. I did it during a professional development residency at the Mary Black Gallery in Halifax. I was really lucky to have the space. It was a lot of work to do all this work under 2 months, but I had a lot of help and a lot of encouragement from my partner and the center, and I'm very grateful. This installation was meant to question political ideologies and the wars and such that happened in the Middle East and North Africa, which constantly projected into our Western culture in various streams of media. And it kind of really influences our everyday lives. In my home growing up, prayer was always an important aspect every day. And I use the prayer mat designs as a way to kind of influence the work and then put it on the wall. The other thing too is family dinner was a huge part. The time to gather and eat food and share our daily stories. The objective was to combine rituals of prayer and consumption of food as a way to engage the viewer in conversation about those social and political issues surrounding Muslims' cultures, opposed to, the idea of war. My aim was to make wall installation of plates, platters, and bowls that were arranged in a rectangular orientation. And the concept of peace was thinking about, the dinner table as a place to share, break bread, and communicate. And then the other piece I wanted to show that kind of talks about, sgraffito and like this place, I call it home or Alhambra. And for me, this vase, it was sold to the Nova Scotia Art Bank. The vessel is in the form of a traditional Alhambra vase. It conceptually tied sgraffito and the designs done with Guyanese water lilies. I've never seen like any sort of like wood block print of those designs, and Nova Scotia mayflowers. And I wanted to kind of talk about my journey from like moving from, Ontario to, living in Nova Scotia, and just how it all kind of connects.
Thank you so much. So we'd love to hear more about a reflection on your trajectory as an artist. Specifically, if you could comment on any gaps in the Canadian art world that inhibit racialized artists from exploring their full potential, and how you've navigated that terrain.
Sorry about that. That's weird. Okay. So specifically, I personally don't think I've encountered many gaps per se. I think I'm really lucky. I've been funded through Arts Nova Scotia and for the majority of my work, while also multiple institutions like the Center for Craft Nova Scotia, CFAT, and whatnot, allowing for spaces of inclusion of the work. And reflecting on my trajectory as an artist, I started by exploring like autobiographical narratives in racial discrimination and Islamophobia. So I'm gonna just pull up the slide of Adaptation here. There we go. It really began with this series of POTS, Adaptation. For me, these works had been sitting in my mind since after graduation in like 2015. And this is something I just wanted to tackle and like create. Each piece began as a normal looking vessel being altered. Each vessel has their own narrative, which I represent in the surface adornments. This series of ceramic pots draws on historical pottery as a foundation. The vessel surfaces are adorned in interpretation in the sense of Islamophobia experienced by myself and other Muslims, Canadian Muslims. I feel that Islamophobia is perpetuated in Western culture through news, social media, and websites, affecting like popular opinions, like influencing everyday lives and non-Muslims. I have a very funny story. Well, it's not really funny. I shouldn't say it's funny. Okay. When this show had first come on air, I had the opportunity for it to be hosted by CBC, and somebody made a comment on Reddit. Yes, the work kind of became Reddit famous because somebody was like talking about how like crude the work was and how unintelligent and like inbred the work was. It was very bizarre. But like the whole idea was they were kind of comparing the work to another master potter of like who's like done the work for many years. But the funny thing is that they were comparing another person of color to another person of color, which like in the end I'm like, okay, but like you're kind of making the whole narrative really come full circle here. You're making the pieces really relate to the struggle and so on and so forth. So there are 5 pieces for this series, and from left to right, All Eyes on Me, Ointment, Armor, That One, and Man Up. They were shown in the Hermes Gallery, and they were funded through Arts Nova Scotia. And I was lucky to have been doing a residency at the time which enabled me to do it, and it was at the Center of Craft. I'm going to talk about Ointment because I think Ointment is one of those pieces it's narrative. It reflects a lot for me, especially. So I'll explain it. Ointment is a narrative about experiences as a child burn victim. On my leg, I have a burn from the top to the bottom of my leg. And I needed medical care and treatment. Being a person of color and a child, the doctor at the hospital made remarks and remarks about the complexion of her skin. Like my mom was there, and like she would always say that, oh, he always made comments about us being really dark. And as a burn victim, scars are very permanent and very noticeable on people of color. The vessel ointment was designed as a traditional Islamic pot form. Historically, I based it off a metal pot, but I wanted to consider it as a ceramic vessel. The surface of the pot is adorned and represents the surface of the body and the damage of a burn and the skin texture, with physical scars and open wounds and bumps and kind of bleeding, oozing, and I'm sorry if this is a bit graphic, but those sort of connotations. From this point, I really struggled, with the whole series. Like I think that what I struggled about it was trying to represent the work and to have folks understand it. So I was kind of really lucky. I had the opportunity to showcase a couple of the pieces in another institution, thanks to Dr. Julie Hollenbeck. She created a show called Unpacking the Living Room and invited a bunch of different artists to be a part of it, as well as like creating performances in space. It was a really great show. It was at Mount St. Vincent Gallery back in 2018. I had the opportunity to record audio description for folks who needed like a descriptive way of understanding the work, or if they had some form of disability. So I got to kind of think about how to describe the work, but also I got to record myself talking about the work. And for me, that was really interesting. So from that point, I wanted to kind of combine sound and having viewers listen in an awkward setting of some sort. And so I have these like grand ideas sometimes, and sometimes I have to be reined in, and my wife is really good at reining me in, but I'm like, but what if? So what if I decided, what if I put a person inside a pot? Like, what if the person had to stick their head inside the belly of a pot and listen to like a poem or an audio? So I created the series Intimated. The series came into fruition, the marriage of both ceramic and sound. I was really lucky. You can see in the photo right here. So this was shown at the Nasca Port Loggia Gallery. And it was through a mentorship program / scholarship program with the Center for Art Tapes in Halifax. And the person in the blue tube there on the left, his name's William Robinson, and he was my mentor. And we kind of worked together on how to kind of figure out audio. And I was able to combine audio in the vessels, and folks were able to put their heads into the pots and listen. And it was really cool to actually see that happen. And I think the pieces were designed to have the viewers interact with the work, placing their ear or their ears up against the holes, as the one on the right side here. You can see, don't forget, it's sort of like Albarello jar. It's considered an apothecary jar, and it's kind of like sealed up. So like the tonality of the sound is like totally distorted when you listen to it, but you can still make out the sounds. It allowed for a different kind of like intimate experience. The audio relates to the ceramic vessels because bottled up voices, recorded topics on political issues, faith, emotional states, daily lived experiences. I designed the vessels to be more approachable through floral motifs seen in like prayer rugs and so on and so forth. And from this point on, I was it kind of made me want to push the idea a little bit further and like combine sound in more of like an installational sense. So this next piece, Heba will play a video for it, but I'm just going to kind of like explain it a little bit. It's called, and just so you know, it's called The Grammar of War, Remnants. I showcased it last year in 2022 at a festival called Nocturne Art at Night. The theme was legacies, and it was curated by Lux and Stephanie Yee. And Grammar of War Remnants for me was a very big undertaking because like it gets its name from the Owen Jones Decoration Encyclopedia, The Grammar of Ornament. I use ornamentation in most of my design, or most of the designs, and so on and so forth. But the thing that really stands out is the clay that's used. This time I wanted to use a clay that's overfired in the kiln. So when you fire this clay to the temperature that we fired it to, it deflates. It doesn't hold its shape. It kind of becomes a deflated balloon. So it's kind of like taking the breath away from a person or the breath away from a pot. Every single vase is a different shape. It was different from the next. It was important that each piece had its own unique shape and design. And also all of them melted differently. Like we had a little accident when we were first trying to figure out how they worked and melted. For the ceramic nerds, they were like rolled into the element of the kiln, which could be very bad, but we dodged a bullet there. Most of the work here on the pots are sgraffito, screen printed, lots of different techniques to kind of get the decoration out there. I think, if you mind, do you mind playing the clip now? Because I think it would be good because there's a little bit more details in there. Thank you, Heba. I really appreciate that. I'm glad that we were able to get it to work. We'll definitely link to the actual video so folks can watch it on their own time. So I'm just going to kind of explain like what that work kind of represents, and so the audio for that video, or the audio component in the installation, is Assalamu alaikum, which is peace be upon you. It's, the phrase that most Muslims will say to another Muslim upon greeting them. I recorded this greeting, and then I stretched the audio for several, it's only 2 seconds, not even, and I stretched it to 14 minutes to create that sound effect. The words are no longer coherent, and it creates kind of like a feeling of elongated pause in a sound void. When people are taking from the community, this feeling is like a never-ending moment in like the core of our memories. And I think the other thing too is, when thinking about the work, I also thought of like genocide of culture and just like trying to eliminate, people's want to be religious or follow their religion or something, along those lines.
Thanks so much, Kaashif. So our next question is, we're curious about this notion of how your work deals with figural representation in the body. So as a general understanding, Islamic art has a unique relationship with figural representation. And as a general statement, works metaphorically with representations of the body. So is this a concept that finds itself in your practice? And could you comment more on this?
Yes. So I've always known growing up figuration was frowned upon for a variety of reasons. And initially I wanted to be an animator growing up because I love animation. And I first began making and learning about artist practices. Islamic art specifically, pottery is meant to be made of like selfless reasons and to practice a good life in relationship to faith. It's meant to showcase the individuality. Instead, it's not meant to showcase the individuality of a maker. When making pots, however, there is nothing more but input of the maker because everything is by choice, from the clay that you're throwing to the decorating or anti-decorating. It's imbued from my body and the physical ability to make that object or sculpture. I've never been someone to allow outside limitations on my way of making, and I would not wish for that artist or creative person. When potters talk about the shape of a form, they use anatomical words. I have a slide about that actually. So this piece is armor from Adaptation, and you can kind of see on the slide. You have the lip of the head, the neck of the vessel, the shoulder, the breath, the belly, and the foot ring, right? So when potters talk about the shape of the form of the pot, they use anatomical words to describe the vessels. So not only do we make pottery for the body's use, bowls, mugs, plates, etc., but we view pottery with words that also describe our own bodies. We describe the breath within the form. It's too much breath, not enough, like not enough expansion, or like the form's not wide enough. Other terms are like the foot of the pot, the belly, the shoulder, the neck. Everything about pottery as an industry is already about the relationship to the body, whether or not it's the resentment about connecting my own bodily journey as a human, adorned or created onto the surface of a vessel. I make pottery so already figuratively, and the surface of a pot is like the outer skin. The interior is what the skin is contained.
And this is incredible. Like, thank you for sharing this. I don't think I'll be able to see like a vessel the same way again. And I'm interested in understanding more about like, your vessels are reflecting the vulnerability of the racialized human body, and especially your, like, as you say, you put yourself into your piece. So how do these vessels that you created reflect your experience and understanding of being a Muslim in Canada?
So early on, I was making pieces about my own personal experience, and having had comments directly, indirectly about my skin color or the presence with a non-Muslim individual. I'm just going to go back to I'll go back to this slide. These works were a way for me to communicate to a broader audience. The events do happen on like a semi-regular basis for me, and even when I made the works about my own experience in Canada, when these events and images of exhibitions are posted online, I've had racist comments or reactions or resentment from the fringe people on the internet. In a lot of ways, I felt damned if I did or damned if I didn't. Being a Muslim for me in Canada has been an ongoing process of trust and acceptance of who I am, and using pottery as a way to process some of the more unsettling things myself. My community and my peers have overcome. in making work about my life experiences and those people around the world and what they've felt, judged, fear, persecution, harm, and trauma. I'm able to kind of connect with new people and hear their experiences and make space for them and to speak their own truth. I think it's incredibly important for people to be seen and heard in some way and to acknowledge, the frustrating life moments.
Thank you. Like I see that we've heard about like All Eyes on Me and Ointment. I was wondering if you could talk more about like that one and Man Up, if you feel comfortable sharing your personal experiences behind creating those.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I think for me, I'm gonna speak about that one because I think that one has a very interesting story. Like the whole context of the vessel itself is it's interesting. So again, I kind of use the same 5 shapes a lot in my practice, and specifically with that one, it's of an alcohol jar, and it's meant to contain apothecary items, so medicines and stuff. But the vessel itself doesn't really function that way. It's pierced with holes of architectural designs that I've used, that I've found in sort of like Islamic art. That being said, the story that kind of represents the work and the reason why it's called that one is because a very long time ago, me and a few individuals, we went up to, I want to say Flint, Michigan. And this was a very long time ago. And going up to Flint, I was the only person of color in the vehicle. So the first question to the border officials to the driver was like, so what's that one doing in the car? Right? Like I wasn't a person, I didn't have a name or anything, I kind of became an object, and so it's a bit like unsettling, being referred to that. And like, they're like, oh, what's that one doing there? Like, are you even allowed to be there, buddy? So it's kind of stuck with me for a little while, and that's kind of where I bottle up my emotions and have them on display.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I'm also curious about the holes. Like I maybe we can talk more about that in Q&A. But what I really want to talk about as well is just like you're saying that you refer to, like, you have a design vocabulary that you're using, and you also refer to kind of Owen Jones being kind of inspiring some of the motifs that you've used. So as art historians, we try to develop contemporary scholarship on Islamic art that undoes some of the harm of the Orientalized perceptions that have persisted for too long within the discipline. And Owen Jones has also been seen as, has been criticized for kind of perpetuating some Orientalized, again, perceptions of what Islamic art is. So it can be quite a challenge to kind of decide what to let go of, especially when you're thinking about Eurocentric scholarship. But like in your work, I see like the work of Owen Jones in ornamentation, especially kind of inspiring you to the point that one of your exhibits is named after the work. So could you elaborate more on your interactions with scholarship, like and your experience and how they've impacted the creation of your work, or in good ways and bad both? So
my first encounter with like the grammar of ornament or Owen Jones was through craft history at NASCAD, design and craft, I think it was called. It was a second-year course taught by the late Dr. Sandra Foldy. I didn't really put 2 and 2 together because I wasn't at that sort of point in my practice where like I was using Islamic themes as part of the work. So my second real interaction with it or with the grammar ornament was when I was working for another artist, and he was like, oh, we should use this and like look at these designs. So looking at the book, I started realizing, man, I had seen these before from somewhere, and like I had to really think about it. And then it kind of like clicked. I was like, holy crow, these are like on the prayer rugs that we had back home, you know, and I was like, holy moly, like, wow, who would have thunk it, right? So in the context of 2023, like now, that book is very problematic as it doesn't give credit to where the designs come from. On one hand, you know, the Grammar of Ornament is a Western compendium and an encyclopedia of of orientalized patterns. Without it, you know, some visual histories could be lost. It's literally the dictionary of patterns written by an Englishman. Jones developed that book to give Westerners a better designs to appropriate those designs, and they were taken from many countries, whether it be from artifacts or observations from trips. He was known to go up to the Middle East pretty frequently to, you know, observe, right? So some of those patterns have even been recontextualized to fit the book format, so completely rewriting their origins. In my honest opinion, the Grammar of Ornament should be rewritten and updated to give context or more light to where the patterns originate and the full meaning and ancestry. Maybe even talk about where the patterns are used, and also it's a copyright issue. You know, not everyone is, or you know, not everybody has been paid for those things. Also, like, some patterns and images are highly sacred. You know, they shouldn't be disseminated. They should be edited with cultural privacy and heritage. There's so much to kind of dissect with that and criticize the book and unraveling the context. But for me, I use the title of Grammar for War Remnants as an homage to the book, the acknowledging where like the knowledge has come from and the issues that arise, especially considering Jones went to the Middle East and studied those patterns. And the title of my work also about how during my lifetime there have been Western countries taking resources from Muslim countries, you know, in the Middle East. There have been suppression and assimilation of Muslim culture and religion into those societies where they are minorities. This encyclopedia is also itself an example of a colonial theft. And that is redistributed for the personal gain of Western consumption and economic growth.
Thanks so much, Cass. So that brings our conversation to a close, but we do have a couple of questions for you, and I can see there's already a question posted in our chat. So I'm going to go ahead and read out the question for you. Muhammad Asim wants to know, are your large pieces supposed to be touched? Did you try to give them specific textures? Did you change the design of the audiovisual pieces from your 2020 show to accommodate the fact that people were going to be touching them? So questions about like the tactility of the objects and that interactive aspect. Thanks so much.
First off, I want to say, Mohammed, thanks for coming. I really appreciate you. Also, I know this person. He came to Adaptation when it first opened, but you know, it's really weird. I would say in the context of like a gallery setting, you probably don't want to go up and touch the work. But like if you know, I think in some cases I would be okay with the tactility of people touching the work, depending on the piece and whether or not if the piece was like sharp, for instance. Like I think putting texture in such a way on ointment, it's a bit rougher than you'd want it to be. So, you know, I don't want you to hurt yourself. As for, I didn't really change any designs. I kind of like, for the audio visual pieces, I kind of just went for it, and I was really apprehensive, like if somebody's actually going to stick their head in a pot. Like it's one of those things where like you're sticking your head into the vessel and literally, you know, it's a suppression, right? So like you don't really hear the outside and you're kind of stuck in there. So like it was really interesting to see people actually like take a chance on it.
So there's a second question from Mohammed. How do you change your approach to creation when making pots for sale rather than exhibition?
I think it really depends on the content and the conceptual nature of what I'm making. If I'm making something that's more functional, I kind of try to think of like everyday uses, right? And kind of make it so individuals can have that sort of accessibility to it. Whereas if it's like a piece that's, you know, more conceptually charged, if I'm playing with scale, there's a quote, I forget the quote off the top of my head, but larger vessels tend to hold more like there's such a relationship between a person to like such a large piece. So it kind of commands sort of a presence. So when I'm thinking of something for sale, I'm thinking of like, is it going to function? But like if I'm thinking of like a piece for like a gallery show or something more conceptual, I'm thinking about the breadth and kind of like the impact that it will have on the person who's going to look at it.
Thank you. I think we have a question from Alexandra Box, who I also think is a ceramics artist. So she's asking that whether you can speak more about your relationship with surface color and the process of deciding on the application of color, especially in the work Serving Dinner Not War. And then she's also wondering if you have any other residencies on the horizon.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to that slide. So Serving Dinner Not War. My background of like being, my parents are both from Guyana in South America. So I kind of wanted to incorporate those colors in some form of a way to kind of talk about like my family and how we share dinner, right? Like during Ramadan, we would share like huge family meals together after fasting and stuff. So like serving has always been like a prominent thing on my mind. And so those are where the sort of colors and ideas came from for that specifically. Most of the decoration that happened, I would say, was generally screen printed and pulled from family prayer rugs for this one specifically. Yeah, like everything was pulled off prayer rugs and like recontextualized to kind of create the designs for the piece. What was the second question there?
She's asking about the like process of deciding on the application of color and also like what other residencies you may have on the horizon.
Okay. So I will say one thing. I don't want to get into too much technical jargon in ceramics, but like with the platters that were ovalized, we wanted to kind of have that sort of like Islamic tile look to it. So the way we did it was we used like the raw state. We used what is it? We used like a pastry cutter, and like zigzagged one way and zigzagged the other way, and that's how we were able to kind of create that sort of effect. As for residencies on the horizon, I don't really do residencies because it's really hard to kind of leave the city and kind of afford things. But I do have I am working on a grant project right now, which is a little relatively different from what I'm used to doing. So eventually it will be out in the world.
Thank you. I hope that you get lots of opportunities, and this is something to consider as well for artists who are trying to create important work like mobility, finances. Thank you for sharing your experiences with that, with those. We have another question. Shamina is asking, are there any other media beyond ceramics that you draw inspiration from?
I would say like in terms of media that I draw inspiration from, like textiles, like food. Food is a pretty big one, I would like to say, like in terms of like cooking and stuff, like but I would say textiles and different like I would say I do like to look at intermedia once in a while. It kind of gives some ideas on how you could like approach things. Like one thing that kind of is very intimidating, which I would like to attempt maybe one day down the future, is revisiting Serving Dinner Not War and kind of playing with animation on it. Whether it's like a physical one, like animation, or like whether it's like playing with projection mapping on the surfaces and stuff like that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience? I will give the people a few more minutes. Like, Hiba, do you have anything else that you would like to say before we conclude?
Yeah, I was really struck, Cass, by just how jarring it is to see a scarred, scarified ceramic vessel when, you know, we understand that kilns don't damage pots. They make them what they are. So there's something incredible about applying scar tissue from a burn onto a vessel that, you know, it is really very much treating it like skin. But that for me was a very, especially because of how you rendered the texture, it truly does look like a burn. And there's something really, it kind of stops me in my tracks. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit more maybe about what it means to create those scars on a surface that is, you know, made whole by fire in a way, rather than damaged by it. There's a beautiful contradiction there, but I think you apply it, so it's very poetic. So I just wanted to come back to that.
For me, I think the hardest thing about creating this sort of surface, it's treading, you know, the line of like full representation versus like partial representation. And I think I'm able to relatively nail it. I'm not going to say I nail it all the time, but like because I'm working with pottery and trying to incorporate figuration in such a way, or like the body, they act as canvases. So the surfaces can be manipulated in such a way to create that. So as a burn victim, I kind of like this pot, like I was in the hospital for like almost a whole month with my burnt leg. So like, and I went through surgery for skin graft. So like, I know the different areas, and like, you know, you're looking at your leg and the texture, and you're trying to sort of like incorporate like all those feelings and emotions into it, right? Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. But ultimately, this is about a representation of skin that's healed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is this metaphor of healing as well. And you play with the albarello jars in a fascinating way. You know, those are containers of medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this theme of recovery and healing as well in your work that really struck me. And it's done subtly, but in a very powerful way. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Like I could spend a lot more hours just hearing about the experiences of each of these works, but I think that we will let everybody go around on their Saturday. I thank you so much for your time and for sharing your work and your deeply personal stories. Kaashif, we're so grateful to have had you here. And a huge thank you to our audience for spending Saturday morning with us, and also from joining us from all around the world. Please do check out like KG Ceramic Studio on Instagram and on Facebook too. And yeah, like and again, and by Kaashif's work. And that said, that